This is Chuck Huber, the voice of Android 17. You're listening to Anime Seekers. You better be, or I'm coming for you. Dragon of the Darkness, Flame!
Jedi Squadron is a podcast run by the Anime Secrets website. Check us out at animesecrets.org for more anime, video game, tokusatsu, and now Star Wars content. Remember to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts today.
Hello, new Padawans, and welcome to the Jedi Squadron podcast. Here, you will be taking lessons in the many pieces of the Star Wars universe, whether it be the movies, animated series, video games, comics, and etc. This is your training into becoming a Star Wars fan as part of the Jedi Squadron. May your training go well, and may the Force be with you, young Padawans.
What is going on, Star Wars Nation? This is the Jedi Squadron podcast presented by animesecrets.org, and I'm your host, Nathan Desa. And today, I'm coming to you guys by myself to do another solo Star Wars novel review. We are taking a look into Legends today in the form of one of the most beloved of all Star Wars Expanded Universe novels, Shadows of the Empire. Shadows of the Empire was first published in April of 1996 and was written by Steve Perry, and it was actually part of a big multimedia project launched by Lucasfilm in 1996 that was collectively known as Shadows of the Empire. I'll go into a little bit more detail about what the whole project was, but today we're mostly going to be focusing on the novel. And we got a lot to talk about since, this was a pretty big novel, not just for the Star Wars fan base, but it's also a very special novel to me, and I'll go into a little bit of detail later, but like I said, we got a lot to cover, so let's jump into the plot, and then I'll give a lot of my thoughts and a lot of details. Since this is a Legends review, there will be a little bit more spoilers in this, so you have been warned. You can skip ahead to the analysis portion if you so wish. But yeah, this novel is almost 30 years old, so yeah, you've been warned, so here we go. Shadows of the Empire takes place in between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi during the original trilogy era. In it, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia Organa, Lando Calrissian, Chewbacca, and the droid duo C-3PO and R2-D2 regroup on the planet Tatooine in the hopes of tracking down Boba Fett and rescuing Han Solo, who was still frozen in carbonite, before he can be delivered to Jabba the Hutt. They enlist the help of another Corellian smuggler named Dash Rendar and track Boba Fett to the planet Gaul. But in the middle of a fight, one of the X-Wing fighters that's assisting them in their rescue mission goes haywire and attempts to shoot Luke down, with it later being revealed that it was actually sabotaged by someone to try and kill Luke. While Luke returns home to Tatooine to look out for Boba Fett, Leia and Lando try to get to the bottom of the attempt on Luke's life. But little do our heroes know that the evil Prince Shizor, a falling prince and the leader of the most powerful Black Sun crime syndicate, is the one trying to kill Luke. Having developed a vendetta against Darth Vader for not only constantly being above him in favor to the Emperor, but also being responsible for the death of his family, Shizor hopes to kill Luke in order to not only humiliate Vader in front of the Emperor by killing the man they want to join the Empire, but also hit Darth Vader personally by killing his son, and thus replace Vader as the right-hand man of the Emperor. A man with his own unique powers, Shizor captures Leia when she approaches him for information about the attempt on Luke's life, and the crew must come together to save Leia, while Darth Vader also has plans of his own for Prince Shizor. Now, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, Shadows of the Empire was actually a major multimedia project that Lucasfilm launched in 1996. It was a big way of reinvigorating interest in the Star Wars franchise, because the special editions, the very first special editions, were, set to be released in theaters the following year. I'm talking about like the very first special editions, like the Greedo shoots first special editions. I know that's an infamous thing, but so there were a lot of the whole story of Shadows of the Empire takes place at the same time between Empire and Return of the Jedi. But there were, a ton of different mediums. There was a series of comics that told the same story, but, it also heavily emphasized the story from the view of Boba Fett and the shenanigans and escapades he goes through while attempting to deliver Han to Jabba. There was actually a video game released on the Nintendo 64 that, showed the story strictly from Dash Rendar's point of view, including, the antics that he goes through trying to track down Boba Fett. We have this novel, of course, which revolves around the story from the point of view of all the heroes that we know and love in the movies. And there was also a lot of new toys released based on some of our new characters. We got toys of Prince Shizor and Dash Rendar. We had toys of Luke, Leia, and Chewie donning disguises that they have to don at points in the book. Although in Leia's case, it's not really a new disguise, since it's the same bounty hunter disguise that we see her don at the beginning of Return of the Jedi. There was a toy released of one of the members of a swoop gang that attacks Luke. A toy of Dash Rendar's ship, the Outrider. All that type of stuff. So to kind of sum it up, Shadows of the Empire was quite the multimedia project. It pretty much gave us all the commercial elements of having a new Star Wars movie without actually giving us a new Star Wars movie. Pretty cool. And I do recommend checking out the video game. I did play it way back in the day, so the video game is pretty cool. But today in this podcast, we're mostly going to be focusing on the novel. And to be honest, if you're asking the short version of this review, does this novel still hold up all these years later? And for me, it does. And I give a full disclaimer here. I have a huge amount of bias toward this book. This was the very first Star Wars Expanded Universe novel that I ever read. In case you don't remember from our introductory podcast, when my older brother left for college, he had like this whole closet full of like Star Wars books and merchandise, and he said I could, read any of them that I want. Like he left them to me. And I remember seeing I remember hearing him talk about Shadows of the Empire a lot. And when I was in 6th grade, when he finally left them, I decided to read this novel. And I absolutely loved it. Seeing these characters go through an adventure that I had never seen before, like these characters that I knew and loved from a movie, seeing them go through another adventure was just an absolutely mind-blowing experience for me as a kid in 6th grade. So I read it, and I probably read it like 2 more times in middle school, and then I read it like 2 or 3 more times in high school. So I've read this book God knows how many times. I know it pretty well, and it still holds up. For those of you who want the short version, this is an absolutely amazing novel. And what I really love about it is that it bridges the gap between these 2 movies perfectly. Like, it bridges the gap, but it doesn't go too far. Because one of the problems that I have with a lot of books and, other stories that are made to bridge gaps is that I feel like sometimes they go a little too far. Like, for example, Rogue One. I love Rogue One. I think Rogue One is a great movie. But one issue that I had with that is that I think it goes a little too far when it comes to introducing the Death Star. The movie is meant to be a prequel to A New Hope and build up on the impending Battle of Yavin. We see the Death Star destroy 2 planets in that movie, but we're told that the Death Star destroying Alderaan was the first demonstration of its true power. And sure, it's a less powerful manner in which it destroys those 2 planets, but seeing it destroy planets like that in Rogue One kind of removes from the tension of seeing the Death Star's destruction of Alderaan. But stuff like that is not so much in this book. I think it does a fantastic job of establishing and setting up conflicts and issues that our heroes would naturally be going through at this point of the story. I'll go into a little bit more details later. But it's also careful to not fully resolve said conflicts. And that's fine, because we already know how these conflicts are going to be resolved in Return of the Jedi. And if anything, This book serves more to establish these conflicts, give a little bit more depth to them, and it honestly kind of makes the resolutions all the more heartwarming when we see them in Return of a Jedi. And to kind of give examples, we have Luke and, the character growth that he goes through all out this book. As the book begins, we see him training, fine-tuning his Jedi skills that Yoda taught him on Dagobah. The obstacles that he has to go through in this situation. Obviously, since he goes through a lot of, we have a lot of action and shenanigans that Luke has to go through, which helps him further strengthen his Jedi powers, which turns him into the much more competent Jedi we see him become in Return of a Jedi. We see a lot of shades of how he may turn to the dark side. Like, for example, there's a lot of moments where, he's very cocky and headstrong about his abilities. He prides himself in how great of a pilot he is. He gets really angry when he finds out that Leia hired Dash Rendar to watch his back since he feels he can look out for himself. There's a point where at the beginning, when he's doing this training on a tightrope, that he can feel the dark side chasing him. And probably one of the big things is that during the climax of the novel, he manages to corner this really powerful android that's Shizor's bodyguard. Her name is Guri. And he has her cornered. He has the chance to kill her while she's defenseless. And he tries to justify in his mind why it's okay to kill this defenseless opponent. But he ultimately backs down. And I think that's a perfect way to foreshadow what he's going to do with Vader later on in the near future. And speaking of his relationship with Vader, he has multiple flashbacks of his duel. We have a flashback of his duel with Darth Vader. Well, not actual Darth Vader, but the vision of Darth Vader in the cave on Dagobah, which, reminds us of a sign of what he could become. And he has a brief flashback of Vader revealing the truth to him, but he actually quickly shuts it down. I do wish that maybe there was a little bit more scenes in the novel where, Luke reflects on his duel with Vader and whether or not Vader was telling him the truth about him being his father. But I honestly do kind of understand, because with what I got when watching Return of a Jedi, especially just recently when my wife and I saw it in theaters, it's pretty clear that at this point in the story, Luke is, focused on saving Han, because, he's kind of put his struggle with Vader on pause, because, he seems completely focused on saving Han during all the scenes on Tatooine. And then, the scene where on Dagobah, where he's about to confront Yoda, he takes this big deep breath. You can tell looking at him in that scene that he's like, okay, I've saved Han. There's no more avoiding it. I have to figure out the truth now. So I can understand why they don't go into as much depth with it, other than just Luke just kind of trying to ignore it for now, just putting it on pause. So I think that was pretty cool. And one other cool thing about Luke is that we actually see the full story behind how he builds his green lightsaber. Literally in the beginning, the whole gang is living in Obi-Wan's old hut, which we see in A New Hope. Luke is actually building his new lightsaber, which, it was pretty cool. And it's very satisfying when we finally get to the scene where Luke finally completes it. That was just really cool. Now, another character who gets a lot of focus, of course, is Leia. And she has her own conflicts that we see her go through as well. The big one being how she feels about her two male friends. On one hand, we obviously know how she feels about Han. She literally told him that she loves him just before he was frozen in carbonite. But then throughout this book, it's clear that she has a strong connection with Luke, and she's not really able to explain it. She loves Luke as well. The book even says that she loves Luke too, but clearly not in the same way. And we all know what's going on. We all know what this ultimately amounts to. But it's pretty interesting to see this from Leia's perspective, and it's all the more deep when we find out the real relationship between Luke and Leia. And thankfully, this book doesn't try to imply that there's any sexual chemistry or anything a little like, like in a certain other novel that I reviewed on this podcast before. Looking at you, Splinter of the Mind's Eye. But, thankfully there's nothing like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed Leia's arc too. Now, we don't really get much from Lando and Chewie, but it's still cool to have them along for the ride. I'm a huge fan of Lando. I wish that we got more of him. So it's just great having him as a major character in the book. We get to see him do his thing, like, playing card games and gambling while Leia and Lando are waiting for a contact of his to show up on Rhodia. And, Chewie is just Chewie in this novel. Although I do like how, the relationship between him and Leia is pretty strong. Chewie is basically acting as Leia's bodyguard because, he has to fulfill the final promise he made to Han of taking care of her before he was frozen in carbonite. It shows just how lovable Chewie is, just really loyal. And it's also funny how Leia is kind of almost sometimes annoyed at how much Chewie followers are around. Like, there's a point where Leia considers wanting to spend some time on the beach while she and Lando are waiting for their contact to show up, but she's thinking, but I can't do that because I got this Wookiee following me and he's going to complain about sand getting in his fur. Like, I just love moments like that. Like, Chewie is a lovable bodyguard and someone that you can always rely on having your back, and I absolutely love that about Chewie. But enough about the characters that we all know and love from the books. What's from the movies, pardon me. Let's talk about some of our new characters. We have Dash Rendar. And the only way I can define Dash Rendar is that imagine Han, like the hot shot Han that we saw in A New Hope, but on steroids. He's a great pilot and he's great in a fight, but you got to pay him to have your back, and him having your back ain't cheap. He's a fun anti-heroic character. He has this real I don't care type of attitude that's really hard to hate. A cool thing to know about this is that he apparently knows the characters from before. Luke recognizes him as one of the pilots that flew a snowspeeder during the Battle of Hoth, and we actually see this because the very first level of the video game is the Battle of Hoth, where Dash is piloting a snowspeeder. Like, the first couple of levels of the video game show Dash Rendar piloting a snowspeeder during the Battle of Hoth, escaping the Echo base after the Battle of Hoth, like how Han and Leia do, and then having to get through the Imperial blockade, just like Han and Leia also did. So that's pretty cool. The role is not as big in the novel. You probably have to play the video game to really get a better idea of what his character is like, but he was still pretty fun in the book. And not only that, but it's also kind of shows like as cocky and as smug as Han came off in A New Hope, he was not as bad as Dash Rendar. That's all I can say. Now, next up we have Prince Shizor, who is a great villain, and he is a very entertaining villain. He's no Sith Lord, but he has his own ways of being a very intimidating villain. There's an early part in the book where a guy tries to kill him with a blaster. Like, he tries to assassinate him, and he literally kills the guy with his bare hands. He's a very strong and powerful guy, and, he has so much charisma and ability to hide his true intentions. And they, they describe his way of talking with people and getting information without giving away the information that he wants. Like, there's a part where he meets with Jabba the Hutt, and he's secretly looking for information about Luke, but then he goes on to talk with Jabba the Hutt about other things to make it seem as if that's the information that he wants from Jabba. So he's a very intelligent and formidable opponent, and he also has the ability to attract women with his charm, and he's actually able to seduce Leia pretty easily until Chewie comes to the rescue, so that's pretty cool. He's one of the first villains that I remember who was a truly cunning antagonist, even if he's unable to use the Force. Kind of sucks that we don't get to see him in other things. He apparently does have a cameo in the Phantom Menace. Like, he's among the people watching the pod race. I've not seen it yet, but I guess I guess that was kind of meant. And not only that, but we do see people of his species, the Falling, in the Clone Wars series. So maybe that's one of his. Maybe that's him, and they just don't truly acknowledge it yet. But I do wish that we could see more of Prince Xizor. Now, unfortunately, we can't see anything from him after this novel because, well, okay, I mean, you guys probably figure out what's going to happen to him. But yeah, but he's still a really great villain, and he's one of the true villains that I really find to be like just proof that you don't have to be a Sith Lord and use the Force to be a truly formidable opponent for our heroes. And we, of course, have Vader in this novel. We get to see him do his thing. He has, he at one point uses his TIE fighter to shoot down some X-Wings, and we're actually given some insight on what he likes to do with his free time. There's actually two parts in the novel where we see him in his meditation chamber, like the one that we see in The Empire Strikes Back, and it's shown that he's able to like fully free himself of the suit, and that's pretty neat. And we see a lot of insight on how he feels about Luke, and it's about what you expect at this point in the story. He admires Luke's strength in the Force, and he views Luke like, obviously he has love for Luke secretly deep down because Luke is his son. But right now, he views Luke more as someone who can be a stepping stone to eventually him taking over from the Emperor. It's cool foreshadowing, and it kind of makes, the story a little bit more powerful since we know what's going to happen in Return of a Jedi. So that's pretty cool. Now, since this novel does take place between Empire and Jedi, there's a lot of neat Easter eggs and cool tie-ins that help connect the two, and it's done absolutely flawlessly. Just to kind of give a couple of examples, there's actually a prelude to this novel. It takes us to a very familiar setting, where Palpatine is talking with Vader about Luke. And in case you don't know, yes, this is the scene from The Empire Strikes Back where it was the very first appearance of the Emperor in the whole original trilogy where, Vader is talking to a holographic projection of Palpatine where they plan to turn Luke to the dark side. The only difference is that we see this scene from the other side where the Emperor is in his, personal room on Coruscant. He's speaking to a hologram of Vader. And the reason why this scene is inserted is because Xizor was apparently with Palpatine during this message, and this is actually how he learns about Vader's plans for Luke. So that was pretty cool, really cool tie-in. And the dialogue is exactly the same, which is pretty cool. In Return of a Jedi, there is a part in the Rebellion's briefing where Mon Mothma mourns over the loss of many Bothans that died, bringing the information regarding the second Death Star. And we're actually shown the mission in full. Luke and Dash Rendar actually lead an effort carried out by Bothans to secure the plans. Now, the book doesn't outright state that the plans that they're stealing are for the second Death Star, but yeah, anyone that can read between the lines knows exactly what they are. At one point in the novel, Leia and Chewie are given bounty hunter disguises to help infiltrate the Black Sun headquarters in this book. And Leia's disguise is actually the one that we see her don in Return of a Jedi, the Bosch disguise, the Ubis bounty hunter. Ubis or Ubis, I don't know how to pronounce that language's name, but so she got that disguise from, her contact in Black Sun. And during the final climax, Dash Rendar brings 3 thermal detonators to the Black Sun headquarters, and Leia actually takes one that she decides to save for later, and this will be the thermal detonator that we see her threaten to blow up Jabba's palace with in Return of a Jedi. And finally, the book ends with the crew regrouping on Tatooine and in order to prepare to rescue Han. And Luke puts his lightsaber into R2, which, lines up with Luke's lightsaber being hidden in R2 before the Carcoon battle. And he records a message, which is basically the exact same message that we see R2 relay to Jabba at the beginning of Return of a Jedi. And yeah, it's a perfectly seamless book. And the book perfectly ends on the quote. It ends, quote, "Hang on, Han, we're coming for you," unquote, which I love. Like, and that to kind of segue into this novel, this is great. Like, honestly, like, even though I know that this book is technically not canon anymore, I can't help but sometimes recommend that if you're watching the original trilogy, you should read this novel after you watch Empire, and then watch Return of a Jedi after this, because this book is a great little side adventure that perfectly illustrates the conflicts that our characters would go through, you know, and like it's got great action, you know, great setup for the character development that we see in Return of a Jedi without going too far. And it's, yeah, there's not much else I can say. And I know I have bias toward this book since I've read it so many times, but it really still does hold up. And that is why I am going to give this novel a 10 out of 10, an A+ grade. And I am going to say that this is a must read for all fans. I know it's technically not canon, although I would like to consider it canon, although I have heard that it might conflict with some things. I'm not sure what the current canon timeline looks like around this time in the Star Wars new canon, but I can hope that maybe one day Disney will decide to canonize this. But even if it's not, still a great novel, definite must read. And you know what? If you want to be one of those people, I would heavily recommend that if you ever watch the original trilogy again, watch A New Hope, watch The Empire Strikes Back, then read this novel, then watch Return of a Jedi, because the stuff in this novel just makes watching Return of a Jedi a much better experience. And I would know because I've done that a couple of times. So with that said, I thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast. I am going to be working on finishing Shadows of the Sith very soon and getting a review out for that. If there are any Legends or new canon novels that you would like for me to review, I'll either get on them right away if I've already read them, and if I haven't read them yet, I'll make reading them my top priority. I'm going to be, after I finish Shadow of the Sith, I'm going to be reviewing the script that I've bought for the Dooku Jedi Lost audio drama, which I'm going to be reading that. And then I'm hoping to get into some of the High Republic books, so I hope you guys will check that out. If you listen to us on Spotify or iTunes, leave us, a review, and you can contact us for any feedback on animesecrets.org. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to leave any comments down below with your thoughts regarding this novel or any other novel. We do like to take people's feedback into account. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're not already subscribed and like this video. And once again, I thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast. We do this for you. And I will see you guys next time when I do another Star Wars novel review. But until that time, you guys stay safe. We love you, and may the Force be with you.